Speaking of fast, though, the big question for this weekend is how fast does Lewis Hamilton actually adapt to Ferrari? And not just in terms of the team environment, because keep all the pleasantries aside, keep all the PR aside, keep all the photo shoots and all the magazine interviews aside, it all boils down to one big question. How competitive can Lewis Hamilton actually be in the car? And for me, that's going to be the big story to watch for this weekend. Even though someone else might end up winning the race, and even though we might see 50 crashes or a red flag or, I don't know, rain coming in as well, the headlines will still be on Lewis Hamilton. So we must talk about him for a second. And my big question in all of it is just how quickly does he learn? Because Lewis Hamilton is known to be someone whose style of learning is very different to others. As James Vowles mentioned on the High Performance podcast, lovely interview, by the way, Lewis's way of learning is by making a mistake and then working backwards now that he's found the limit. So it might take him a lot of time and he might not have as many consistent laps, but ultimately he knows the limit. And once he gets there, we know that Lewis Hamilton has an eighth gear that nobody else ever can get to. And that to me is going to be just such an exciting thing to watch. Just how close is he to Charles Leclerc on the very, very first day? And then there's also other things around it, Kunal, because he's in a team with Charles Leclerc, who's the Prince of Ferrari. And we're all assuming that Lewis is going to be the slower one in the first race, but we're not quite sure of what the gap is going to be at the end.
Again, that's, I love this. New season, new assumptions. Lewis Hamilton, opening race of the season, is going to be slower than Charles Leclerc. Well, why not? There are two assumptions to be made. Either he's slower or he's faster. You made one. But I think eventually what will happen is what his gap is to Leclerc. So whether he's slower or whether he's faster, so long as they've had clean runs, if the gap is within a tenth and a half, or at best 2 tenths, I think it's going to be a very successful debut at Ferrari, even if he doesn't win. Although, I think Räikkönen and Alonso, the two drivers recent times who won on their Ferrari debut, if Lewis Hamilton can win on debut, it could very well be, that's the most successful way of measuring his success. But yeah, talking of gaps to Leclerc, a couple of tenths here and there, whether he's ahead or behind, it's just a couple of tenths that will define that, okay, that means Lewis is comfortable even on single lap pace against a driver who's really well known for his single lap pace.
Good question. Sundaram, where do you think Lewis has to finish, at least, for this to be counted as a successful weekend? I'd say third.
Yeah. No, I think generally, even if he finishes in the top 4 or 5, I think he's going to take the positives out of it, because the thing is, for him, it's a lot more. I think it's arguably his biggest change in his F1 career. He's not just changing engines, but he's changing teams, the team culture, and there is so much more that you have to really get accustomed to when you're joining Ferrari from whichever team you're joining. So it's of course going to be a big challenge for him, but if he's competitive, and like Kunal says, a tenth or two, it's ultimately going to be how close he is to Leclerc and the others. I doubt you can really put... a podium is going to be a great win. A podium is going to be very positive for him. But the interesting thing is, Lewis Hamilton has just switches on around certain tracks. Silverstone, he does that. He does that in Hungaroring. And Australia is also one of those tracks. Not on race day though, but in qualifying. Because he's taken 8 pole positions around Melbourne, which is the second most that he's taken at one track. Hungaroring, he's had 9 pole positions. Interesting fact is, whenever Australia has hosted the season opener in the hybrid era, there's only one pole sitter. There's always been just one pole sitter, and that is Lewis Hamilton. Will he put his car on pole this time? It's difficult, but if he puts it on pole, people are going to go crazy.
Yeah, and to add to that, Lewis Hamilton is a great adapter to new machinery. Think about the greatest rookie season in Formula One history. Who delivered it? Who was fighting for a world championship in their first year in Formula One? It was none other than Lewis Hamilton. That was 2007 when he was with McLaren, and he won a race, I think 8 or 10 races into his Formula One career. Then 2013, he joined Mercedes after leaving McLaren, the very successful McLaren. And most people said, that's a crazy move. Why would you do that? Why would you join a mid-table team instead of staying at McLaren, who have been world champions for such a long time? The answer was what they were building for the future. And Lewis Hamilton ended up winning a race by the mid-season mark yet again. It's clear, Lewis in a new car, it's not going to be too much of an issue. I think it's just a matter of time. And it will be phenomenal to see where exactly he can be at the end of this race. But if there's one thing going against him, Kunal, It's the lack of testing time. He only did a day and a half in testing, and that's not enough for anyone, let alone. I mean, if you're a rookie, that's terrible. But if you're an 8-time world champion like Lewis, that still stings you.
Actually, I have a different view on that because Ferrari
Yeah?
have thrown everything they could at Lewis Hamilton in preseason. All the TPC tests that they're allowed, the number of kilometers, they maxed it with Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton's driven, I think, 3 generations of Ferrari cars. In fact, at the event they did in Milan, he drove the Sebastian Vettel Ferrari car as well for doing donuts and the road show. So I think they've thrown everything at him. They've given him all the TPC mileage, so much so that any of the Ferrari juniors wanting to do TPC this year probably don't have the mileage remaining anyway, because Ferrari's decided to give that to Lewis. So, frankly, Lewis's start at Ferrari, while everyone's going to be scrutinizing every point of data they can get from Australia, the key thing to remember is that how well he feels settled in, right? There will be a gap to Leclerc, like I said, whether he's ahead or behind. But what do I mean by settling in? How are they reacting to his, qualifying positions? There are lots of times we've seen Leclerc being like, why was I sent out mid-pack? Okay, how well do they time out his releases in qualifying? How do they give him the maximum chance to get in as many laps towards the end? Or how do they deal with mixed weather conditions? Since that's coming, we've often laughed on Ferrari's pit lane calls and their strategy and so on. So how they fit in well. Remember, Lewis is not somebody who's new to this. He's probably seen them on social media much as we have. And when he was a Mercedes driver, he's probably had a laugh as well. So he would have gone through with his team, understanding that why did that mistake happen or why was that call taken? And he would have sort of worked on building what he would call it as his trust level with his set of engineers and mechanics. All of that is going to be tested. All of that is where he eventually, his comfort level with his team is where we will never see it from the outside, but that's what he's going to be, sort of building on from the inside so that he gets a better start into the season as a whole. It's 24 races that he's going to be doing that. And I'm actually looking forward to some of the fun things. Could Lewis Hamilton drive into the Mercedes pit box? He's done that before. When he moved to Mercedes, he drove into the McLaren pit box. And if Ferrari actually fight for the win, this is the controversial part. Could they be using team orders, right? If Lewis is, second and Charles is just leading, could they tell Lewis, do not attack because they want to bank in the 1 and 2? It could well be happening. A team's wanting 1 and 2 finishes could, either use team orders or say, keep it clean, guys, and so on. So could that be something? And I'd love to see how Leclerc is handling the pressure, because I think in the car, he's not going to be unfazed by whoever his teammate is. But every time a Ferrari driver's on stage, there are claps. And if that Ferrari driver is Lewis Hamilton, there are 2x the claps. Okay, so from being the Prince of Ferrari, suddenly the Emperor is here. How will Leclerc take that? And could that impact him in the car as well?
The Emperor or the Don? What are we calling him? I think the Don. Don of Ferrari, no?
I'd love the Don as well. I'd love that photo shoot he did with the F40 and Enzo's home. And yeah.
That's more like it.